In this report, anatomy of DPF regeneration, the dreaded diesel particle filter. Bastard. Plus, some nuts from the comments feed right at the end upliftingly. Sad to say, Dunning and Kruger, apparently both unaffected by the recent coronavirus outbreak at this stage, but we live in hope, obviously. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au, the place where Australian new car buyers save thousands off their brand new cars. Hit me up on the website for that. I get all sorts of kooky questions, right, loosely based in reality, concerning DPF regeneration. Take a look. I have a 2018 Ford Transit DCIV 2-litre. Even 80 miles per hour is only about 2,000 RPM in sixth gear. Now, a DPF requires, as I understand it, a decent flow of gas at a decent temperature to maintain a healthy state. So given that this engine gets along very nicely at legal highway speeds at such low revs, how does one ensure a trouble-free life from the DPF, as I assume, perhaps incorrectly, that it's not getting worked at such low revs? ... Up front, let me suggest with all due sincerity that 5 dots does not an ellipsis make. 3 is the Goldilocks number. I think you'd agree. Less is more here, Grant. But still, you are quite the brave dude, I'd suggest. 80 miles per hour in a Ford Transit. That's living life on the ragged edge right there. Even in K's, it's fairly brave. Hashtag ghost of Pinto. You might have to, evac the Transit at any stage on fire, which is kind of inconvenient on the freeway from time to time. But frankly, the revs here, 2,000-ish, pretty typical for a diesel. It's just how they roll. Now look, in addition to this stuff raised by Grant, which we will get to in just a sec, I've also had quite the few dead-set nutters who tell me that instead of doing that boring highway driving advised by the friggin' manufacturer, they're just going to hold the car in second gear manually and rev its tits off around the burbs to regenerate the DPF, because they know better. Good safety tip there, okay? Please do not breed if that's you. Humanity will, of course, thank you later. DPF regeneration, just so we're all on the same page, it's the process of burning off the trapped particles so that when the residue emerges from the tailpipe, it's a whole lot less and harmful to humans. A lot of that biologically active stuff in the trapped particles gets decomposed and rendered down to more inert chemicals in hellfire. Yes, just like in the Book of Revelation, I'd suggest. Only real. This regeneration process typically happens at highway speeds. Sometimes it's quite passive, seeing as the exhaust heats up, and the DPF becomes just a little furnace of its own accord. Isn't that nice? That's actually called a passive regeneration. It just happens in the background, nothing changes, it just burns itself to smithereens, and you go on with your life delivering, important stuff to important people with your transit, whatever. But DPFs also have a differential pressure sensor at either end. There's a sensor on the way in and a sensor on the way out, and that comprises the differential pressure sensing capability, and it measures the pressure drop across the DPF, okay? As the pressure drop increases, so more pressure across the DPF, the car knows that the filter is getting more and more blocked over time because more pressure difference equals more particle load and greater resistance to flow. That's how it knows. At some predetermined blockage level, 50% or something, it triggers an active regeneration if the driving conditions are suitable, okay? Typically, you'd need to be driving at more than about 70 or 80 k's an hour. That's about 50 miles an hour. America, Brexit, places like that. And you'd need to be in a relatively high gear in the transmission, like 4th, 5th or 6th in a 6-speed auto. That's equivalent to operating at low load, okay? Because high gears are selected by automatic transmissions when the engine's not working that hard. I think you'd agree. So If you're stuck in traffic in the suburbs, the filter just continues to fill up. It will not actively regenerate. Generally, it throws a warning light when the blockage gets beyond a certain level, and depending on the protocol in the manual, you better head for the open road stat or to a dealership for a manual regeneration, which takes place in a service bay. You know, they've got to plug in and set it all up, and then it just happens, okay? An owner typically can't do that. Let's just assume that that hasn't happened, though. The service bay thing is not on the menu right at the moment, so manufacturers all set their own engine operation parameters for active regeneration out on the open road. So if the operating conditions tick all of those boxes to trigger an active regeneration, the fuel injectors just change how they operate, and this turns the DPF into a little stainless steel furnace, albeit briefly. The injectors typically start delivering a little bit of additional fuel after the combustion event into the hot exhaust flow while it's on the way out of the chamber. And that travels out the manifold and into the DPF, essentially on fire, whence it burns the shit out of the particles and unclogs your DPF. And you can have a little party down there. I suspect, but I have not yet been able to confirm, that they run the engine a little bit lean like that. So there's a bit of oxygen left in the exhaust to support the combustion of that additional fuel after the combustion event in the DPF. Engines don't typically run lean at high loads out there on the road because A, it melts them, and that does tend to be a problem, and B, NOx production goes through the roof. Just ask Volkswagen about that and how well that works out. So that's probably why regeneration is only supported at low engine loads. I'd suggest like when you're cruising on the highway. And let's not forget, this is where fuel economy is maximised. You're using the smallest amount of fuel to travel a given distance in those conditions. So Grant here, frankly, is just a little bit off with the fairies on how this works. Your engine doesn't need to work hard to regenerate the DPF, not at all. In fact, you want it to be operating in a high gear at low load at highway speeds. That's optimal. In fact, it's perfect. Engine management voodoo back at R&D Central, programmed in, just does the rest in the background. And I also don't happen to agree that 2,000 RPM is low for a diesel, or even 1,500. 2,000 is halfway to the red line, let's not forget. And typically, maximum torque production is at 2,000 or 2,500, something like that, if you max the accelerator in a modern diesel. So just remember, there are some very dodgy DPF integrations out there on the road, and I'm looking at you specifically, Toyota. Your DPF is clogged and it keeps clogging, and if you're doing enough low-load highway driving to support ample active regeneration, and you're back at the dealership a dozen times for a manual regeneration in a friggin' service bay, the blockage is a symptom of a problem elsewhere. Guaranteed. And treating the symptom, I think you'd agree, never actually cures the problem. So if this just keeps happening to you, you need to pressure your dealer to investigate things like the integrity of the inlet air plumbing and the MAF sensor operation and things of that nature, because these can lead to the problem. A lot of dealers are actually okay at identifying the defective parts, like a blocked DPF, but they're shithouse at diagnosing the underlying cause. So if your dealer is flat out stupid at that, conscript the manufacturer to supply some additional technical support to get to the bottom of your problem. So I guess, in a nutshell, the answer to Grant's question here is just drive normally, dude, and get out on the open road as often as you can. And if the manufacturer did an okay job in R&D, your DPF will be unproblematic for the life of the vehicle. The Ming Moles there, amply demonstrating their first order accessible accessories. Try saying that with a bottle of scotch on board. As always, profoundly helpful when, polishing the tools. They certainly help me regenerate from time to time. Speaking of the tools, though, now this from you. Help me out, LC cousins. What the fuck is a bogan? Too friggin' easy. Just think Southern Hemisphere redneck, only, less inbred, less articulate, and more of a mad rooter. About the same in terms of overall hygiene, grooming, dress sense, and dependency on government support, and obviously also net asset backing in relation to driving the human gene pool forward. Hashtag Australia. John, your soapbox is auto-expert. You have proper training there and can assist people with lesser knowledge. Please keep doing this work. However, your strong faith in the Antichrist and atheism and your complete insulting of Christians is not relevant to your knowledge base of auto-engineering. Please keep your strong religious beliefs out of the show. Terms like God-bothering Christians has inconsistencies at so many levels. Really? I'd suggest that's basically gibberish. You cannot have faith in the Antichrist without having an equal amount of faith in Christ, because the existence of one is predicated upon the existence of the friggin' other. So I'd suggest, if you have faith in the Antichrist, you are definitely not an atheist. They're mutually exclusive propositions. Believing in the Antichrist is like being a liar. Paradoxically, to be a liar, you need to respect the truth, or what you believe the truth to be, in order that you can go about your fine business of diligently misrepresenting that truth. And yet, the average person, I think you'd agree, would say that the liar disrespects the truth. I'd suggest au contraire. Believing in the Antichrist demands a belief in Christ, okay? Because without Christ, the Antichrist just puts on a suit every day and has really nothing to do. Also, you definitely don't need faith to be an atheist. Atheism is the complete lack of religious faith, or, to put it another way, perhaps simpler, a matter of rejecting a bunch of outdated Bronze Age bullshit for which there's no evidence or utility in the 21st century. The term God-bothering Christian, well, I'd suggest that's a tautology. Christianity is all about bothering God over and friggin' over. Must be so overwhelming to be Kim Jong-un in the sky. All those complaints. Systematically bothering God is a baseline requirement of Christianity, and certainly it's not optional. Dear God, I do apologise once again most sincerely for thinking about the Ming moles and their compelling accessories while I was waxing my vegetables recently. And while I've got you, Lord, please cure Mum's hemorrhoids, would you? And kindly don't roast me after I die. Well, at least not too much. I love you too. Bye. I just can't make that my daily routine, mate. I don't see every one of your very eliminating YouTube videos, but I would like to know the meaning of the Mal's hat. Well, thank you very much, Mal, and I don't believe I have to join the dots too hard to see where your interest is coming from on this. I do seem to have eliminated Holden fairly easily, for example, but to be fair, they did most of the heavy lifting there themselves. And I thank you for your interest in whatever small number of my, quote, very eliminating videos you do watch. Furthermore, I do tend to give many people the shits. So in that sense, I suppose the videos are literally eliminating by nature. Well picked up. MALS is in fact the acronym for my upcoming federal politics campaign, which I will run on to become your Australian Prime Minister next time around. I therefore call on you proud son or daughter of bread stealers to make Australia less shit. Just a little bit less shit, but do it every day, which will not be that hard, frankly, given the Australian shitification quotient right at the moment. I would vote for you. Thank you sincerely, Max. I appreciate the sentiment, son. I surely do. But I would never allow onto the electoral roll any person who would deem to vote for a Prime Minister such as me. This seems only prudent, viz. The future health of our great nation. And I ask you, who would actually want that total cock of a job?